Good morning students, we are once again back in our videos for English. I am Mahendra, faculty of MLZS Z School for Accounts and English PGT. Students, we have started the revision once again, and in the last class we have done the story Letter to God from our book First Flight, and now today we will be doing the first chapter from another book, that is Footprints Without Feet, and the name of the chapter is Triumph of Surgery. Okay. So it is also a very interesting chapter about a small dog named Tricky, who was pampered and overfed by his rich mistress. The dog falls seriously ill and his mistress consults a veterinary surgeon. So does he perform an operation? Does the dog recover? Let's see. The triumph of surgery means victory of surgery, and the surgery doesn't take place, but still the dog recovers. This chapter tells us not only animals but also human beings need to keep good and healthy habits, healthy eating habits, not to overfeed, otherwise the result is we will be getting sick. Okay. Let's read the chapter. I was really worried about Ricky this time. I had pulled up my car when I saw him in the street with his mistress. So once his mistress has taken the dog for a morning walk, so the writer goes over there and he sees that the mistress was taking her dog and moving on the road, and I was shocked at his appearance. He had become hugely fat like bloated sausage. So the writer has compared the dog with a bloated sausage with a leg at each corner. His eyes, bloodshot and rheumy, stared straight ahead, and his tongue lolled from his jaws, as if he was struggling to move ahead. He was not well. He was not okay. Mrs. Pumphrey, the name of the mistress, hastened to explain. He was so listless, Mr. Heroit was the veterinary doctor. He seemed to have no energy. I thought he must be suffering from malnutrition, so I have been giving him some little extras between the meals to build him up. Some malt and cod liver oil and a bowl of Horlicks at night to make him sleep. Nothing much really. तो वो ये कहती हैं कि she has not given him much to eat, only just a little bit. But the doctor says that this is not little bit. And did you cut down on the sweet things as I told you? Oh, I did for a bit, but he seemed to be so weak I had to relent. He does love cream cakes and chocolate, so I can't bear to refuse him. I looked down again at the little dog. That was the trouble. Tricky's only fault was greed. He had never been known to refuse food. He would tackle a meal any hour of the day or night, and I wondered about all the things Miss Pumphrey hadn't mentioned. I'm giving him plenty of exercise. Well, he has his little walks with me, as you can see, but Hodkin, the gardener, has been down with lumbago, so there has been no ring throwing lately. So the gardener used to take the dog in the garden and used to throw the ring, and the dog used to run and bring it back to the gardener. But since he is not well, so now the lady has to bring the dog for a walk. I tried to sound so severe. Now I really mean this. If you don't cut his food right now and give him more exercise, he is going to be really ill. You must harden your heart and keep him on a very strict diet. Mrs. Pumphrey wrung her hands. Oh, I will, Mr. Heroit. I am sure you are right, but it is so difficult. So very difficult. She set off head down along the road, as if determined to put the new regime into practice immediately. I watched their progress, and growing concern. Tricky was tottering along in his little tweed coat. He had a whole wardrobe of these coats for a cold weather and raincoat for wet days. He struggled on, drooping in his harness. Harness is the string with which the dog was tied. I thought it wouldn't be long before I heard from Mrs. Pumphrey. So the doctor, since he was a doctor, he observed the dog, and he came to know that definitely she's going to give me a call that Tricky was not well, and she will definitely call the doctor to see the dog. The expected call came within a few days. Mrs. Pumphrey was distraught. Tricky wouldn't eat nothing, refused even his favorite dishes, and besides, he has bouts of vomiting. He spent all his time lying on a rug, panting. Okay. Didn't want to go for walks. Didn't want to do anything. I had made my plan in advance. The only way was to get Tricky out of the house for a period. I suggested that he be hospitalized for about fortnight to be kept under observation. The poor lady almost swooned. She was sure he would pine and die if he did not see her every day. But I took a firm line. Tricky was very ill, and this was the only way to save him. In fact, I thought it best to take him away without delay, and followed by Mrs. Pumphrey wailings. So Mrs. Pumphrey used to love her dog very much, and she started crying when the doctor took away the dog with him. I marched out to the car carrying the little dog wrapped in a blanket. The entire staff was roused, and maid rushed in and out, bringing his day bed, his night bed, favorite cushions, toys and rubber rings, breakfast bowl, lunch bowl, supper bowl. Realizing that my car would never hold all the stuff, I started to drive. As I moved on, Mrs. Pumphrey with a despairing cry threw an armful of little coats through the window. I looked in the mirror before I turned the corner of the driver. Everybody was in tears. So the maids, the mistress, everybody was crying. Out on the road, I glanced down at the pathetic little animal gasping on the seat by my side. I patted the head, and Tricky made a brave effort to wag its tail. Poor old lad, I said, you haven't a kick in you, but I think I know a cure for you. So the doctor was a dog lover, and he was also a doctor, so it was his duty to cure Tricky. At the surgery, the household dogs surged round him. Tricky looked down at the noisy pack and dull eyes, and when put down, lay motionless on the carpet. The other dogs, after sniffing round him for a few seconds, decided he was an uninteresting object and ignored him. So when he reached over there, the other dogs who were already there in the surgery came to see the doctor, and when they saw Tricky, they thought him to be uninteresting, and they went away. I made up a bed for him in a warm loose box next to the one where the other dogs slept. For 2 days I kept an eye on him, giving him no food but plenty of water. At the end of the second day, he started to show some interest in his surroundings. On third, he began to whimper when he heard the other dogs in the yard. When I opened the door, Tricky trotted out and was immediately engulfed by Joe. Joe was a greyhound and his friends. Means they were inviting Tricky to play with them. After rolling him over and thoroughly inspecting him, the dogs moved off down the garden. Tricky followed them, rolling slightly with a surplus fat. Later that day, I was present at feeding time. I watched while Tristan slopped the food into the bowls. Tristan was the person who used to take care of the dogs. There was the usual headlong rush, followed by the sounds of high-speed eating. Every dog knew that if he fell behind the others, he was liable to have some competition for the last part of the meal. Now, when they had finished, Jaisin ka khatam hua, Tricky took a walk around the shining bowls, licking casually inside one or two of them. Next day, an extra bowl was put out for him, and I was pleased to see him jostling his way towards it. From then onwards, his progress was rapid. He had no medical treatment of any kind, but all day he ran about the dogs, joining in the friendly scrimmages. He discovered the joy of being bowled over, tramped on, and squashed every few minutes. He became an accepted member of the gang and likely silky little object among the shaggy crew, fighting like a tiger for his share at mealtimes and hunting rats in the old hen house at night. He had never had such a time in his life. All the while, Mrs. Pumphrey hovered anxiously in the background, ringing a dozen times a day for the latest bulletin. Kya hua? How was the dog? What is the condition of the dog? I dodged the question about whether his cushions were being turned regularly or his correct coat worn according to the weather, but I was able to tell her that the little fellow was out of danger and convulsing rapidly. The word convulsing seemed to be something of Mrs. Pumphrey. She started to bring round fresh eggs, 2 dozen a time, to build up Tricky's strength. For a happy period, my partners and I had two eggs each for breakfast. But when the bottles of wine began to arrive, the real possibilities of the situation began to dawn on the household. It was enriched to enrich Tricky's blood. So now she also started bringing wine for the dog. Lunch became a ceremonial occasion with 2 glasses of wine before and several during the meal. We could hardly believe it was the brandy became when the brandy came to put a final edge on Tricky's constitution. For a few nights, the fine spirit was rolled round, inhaled, and reverently drunk. They were days of deep content, starting well with an extra egg in the morning, improved and sustained by a midday wine, and finishing luxuriously round the fire by the brandy. So doctor enjoyed all the thing brought by Mrs. Pumphrey. It was a temptation to keep Tricky on as a permanent guest, but I knew Miss Pumphrey was suffering, and after a fortnight, means after 15 days, felt compelled to phone and tell her that little dog has recovered and was awaiting collection. Within minutes, about 30 feet of gleaming black metal drew up outside the surgery. The chauffeur, that is driver, opened the door, and I could just make out the figure of Mrs. Pumphrey, almost lost in interior. Her hands were tightly clasped in front of her. Her lips trembled. "Oh, Mr. Heroy, do tell me the truth. Is he really better?" "Yes, he's fine. There's no need for you to get out of the car. I'll go and fetch the dog." I walked through the house into the garden. A mass of dogs was hurtling round and round the lawn in the midst. Ears flapping, tails waving, was the little dog, golden figure of Tricky. In 2 weeks, he had been transformed into lithe, hard, muscled animal. He was keeping up well with a pack, stretching out in great bounds, his chest almost brushing the ground. I carried him back along the passage to the front door. Chauffeur was still holding the car to open the car door open, and when Tricky saw his mistress, he took off from my arms in a tremendous leap and sailed into Miss Pumphrey's lap. She gave a startled cry. "Oh!" and then had to defend herself as he swarmed over her, licking her face and barking. During the excitement, I helped the chauffeur to bring out the beds, toys, cushions, goats, bowls, none of which had been used. As the car moved, Miss Pumphrey leaned out of the window, tears shone in her eyes, her lips trembled. "Oh, Mr. Heroid," she cried, "how can I ever thank you?" This is the triumph of surgery. So this is the message of this chapter is that we should keep healthy food eating habits. Okay, I think children, you must have once again understood the story. Thank you and have a nice day.